There was something nefarious transcending at Morningside Mortuary, and even something more sinister with its mortician. When Mike, Reggie, and Jody realize that they're dealing with something that's out of this world, they must team up to risk it all and stand up against the infamous Tall Man. Tonight on Watching in the Dark. Phantasm was released in 1979 by Don Coscarelli, who wrote, directed, and edited the film. I originally reviewed this in 2019 for this series, but that was only a couple of sentences long, and I figured it's time to revisit this classic. Phantasm would be the first of 5 in its series, with Phantasm 2, Phantasm 3, Lord of the Dead, Phantasm 4, Oblivion, and Phantasm 5, Ravager. Now, I have to admit the sequels do kind of go downhill from there, but Phantasm 2 is certainly worth a watch, and there's the most epic car crash ever in Phantasm 3. That one's definitely worth checking out as well, too. 4 and 5, well, you can kind of take them or leave them, unless you're truly a fan of the series. Phantasm was basically a family production. It was funded by Don Coscarelli Sr., and A. Michael Baldwin, Reggie Bannister, and even Angus Scrimm had worked with Coscarelli on 2 previous films, Jim, the World's Greatest, and Kenny and Company. Bill Thornbury would return for 4 out of the 5 sequels, but both he and A. Michael Baldwin were forced out of their roles in Phantasm 2 by Universal Studios. I think it's just the most ridiculous thing ever, and one of the worst casting decisions I've ever seen. Fortunately, Coscarelli was able to take over the franchise and bring everyone back for the remaining sequels. Phantasm's initial budget was speculated to be about $300,000, but at the box office it brought in $22 million. There are a couple of things about this movie that make it so cool. A, flying orbs that drill holes into skulls, and B, Angus Scrimm as the Tall Man. Angus Scrimm is iconic in this role and would unfortunately be typecast in all films outside of Phantasm. The flying orbs only make up a small portion out of the horror involved in the movie, but when they do, they certainly pack a punch. Now, there's one of my favorite scenes in this movie when, Reggie and Jody think Mike is crying wolf. Mike's the young kid. Mike actually cuts off one of the Tall Man's fingers, and it's still animated, so he puts it in a box and brings it home. Well, he decides to open up that box, and this flying insect just comes buzzing around and is attacking Jody and Mike, and they finally ended up shoving it down the garbage disposal. Reggie comes in and just starts, talking just random stuff, completely oblivious to it, and then of course the bug flies out of the garbage disposal, attacks it, and they all have to try to kick its ass. It's just hilarious and akin to the humor that is part of Phantasm, combined with the horror. Phantasm is pure and simple a metaphor for death. Let's take a look at what goes on here. The film starts at a funeral. There's kids playing in a cemetery. It also takes place in a mortuary. The 2 brothers are orphans. There's a hearse car chase, and there's also 2 sex scenes that take place on gravestones. Oh, wow. Now, everything about this film is truly about death, with its black-clad mortician and his little demonic Jawas running around doing his bidding. Now, the real hero of this movie is the exact opposite. The iconic Reggie Bannister, dressed in white, and when he's not kicking ass, he makes a living with his ice cream truck. Now, while the movie starts off as the tale of Mike and Jody, it's actually going to be the story of Reggie Bannister and Angus Scrimm. They would appear in all of the following sequels. Remember that name, Reggie Bannister, the all-American hero and lady killer. Phantasm is a buddy movie that turns out to not have such a happy ending. It is revealed that all that have passed through Morningside Mortuary have suffered a fate worse than death, something transformative, something evil. Its dream sequences and other cross-dimensional realms are nothing short than an homage to Dario Argento. While Argento primarily used red and blue lighting to translate his horror, kind of like how Russ previously discussed within Pumpkinhead, Coscarelli does something different to represent good and evil with the colors black and white. Now, the film isn't necessarily all that scary, but it certainly does have its uncomfortable moments. What makes Phantasm a great horror movie is the effort and the heart of the amateur actors. You really feel for Mike, Jody, and Reggie, and even though the film has its soft spots, it is truly a horror classic. Well, there you have it, folks. A 1979 rewind review of the horror sci-fi classic Phantasm. It ranks up there with the other films in the slasher franchises, but by no means does it fall into the slasher genre. It stands alone as a demonic sci-fi terror that would be continued through all the films to follow. And when you hear the word, boy, you best believe that the tall man isn't too far behind, waiting to watch it in the dark. Take care, folks.